June is going to be wild, but this is what Kirby Smart does best, right? Welcome to our Georgia coverage, featuring, of course, Palmer Thoms from Dogs 247 Sports. So we encourage you to head on over there, of course, this being big recruiting season, even bigger than it usually is, to head on over to 247 Sports. Palmer, how we doing today?
Doing well, enjoying a nice, relaxing Memorial Day weekend before the craziness of June starts up next Tuesday.
So I saw a figure the other day, and I'm not going to try to remember the specific numbers, but basically only 10 to 15% of the players that are typically committed at this point are committed for good reason. They haven't been able to get on campus. So what that tells us is that you got like 85% of the players to 90% of the players that usually would be already committed, certainly would be still recruited and could flip or whatever. But that much more activity is going to go on once we hit that first weekend of June. All those visits ensue. And of course, you know that I talk to guys like you all over the country. The same deal's going on at all the major schools across the country. And then you would think late June to early July, we're just going to get commits flooding in constantly by the day. Do you get a feel for the timing of what that could look like?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's late June, early July. I think a lot of these teams are trying to get in there early and get these kids to see these campuses, in these first couple of weeks of June, just so that, they can have their minds made up. A lot of these kids, do want to make a decision before their senior year so that they can focus on, high school football, finishing up their senior, their high school experience. So I think, like you said, late June, early July, you're going to see a lot of these commits roll in and throughout the month of July as well. So this June recruiting period, like you said, crazier than ever has been before. But because of the, circumstances of COVID, these kids haven't been on campuses since, first weekend in March of 2020. So that's 15 months now. It's the longest that these kids have ever gone without being on these campuses, without interacting with these coaches face to face. And so, and like you said, this is what Kirby Smart does best. For better or worse, he's one of the best recruits in the country, or best recruiters in the country. And he's looking forward to bringing in some of those best recruits in the country to see Athens, Georgia over the next couple of weeks.
Please like the video, share the videos out on social media, because if you enjoy the content and you're here all the time, others will as well. And of course, subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. All right, Palmer, we're going to put you to work. Let's start at running back. Branson Robinson's a guy that everybody wants, but Georgia looks to be in pretty prime position right there. And he's going to make an early visit at the beginning of June.
Yeah, Branson Robinson, number 5 running back in the country. He's a 4-star prospect right now. Rated the number 57 player overall per the 247 Sports composite, top player in the state of Mississippi. He will be on campus for Georgia that first weekend of June for an official visit. He's a guy that reminds Georgia fans of Nick Chubb, and his build. He's super strong, even just the kind of the way that he looks. He's 5'10", 220, can, lift with the best of them in the weight room. He runs hard. Georgia's got a running back committed already in Jordan James out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The Nashville area, putting out some big time prospects. This is a guy that they want to add on to him. They really want to take 2 running backs in this class, knowing that, you're going to have Zamir White and James Cook likely headed out after this next season. So you got to bring in 2 top guys to replace those 2. And, if you're Georgia and RBU and you want to keep that claim, you got to get some of your top prospects. And Branson Robinson, number 5 running back in the country, certainly one of those for the Bulldogs.
And Palmer, you're of the thought that if it's not Branson Robinson, who is it? Or is there anybody? It seems like you and others are pretty much focused on him, and he's the guy.
Yeah, I think he is the guy for Georgia in terms of adding on another running back. There's certainly other guys that they are, still talking to, but he's their top priority at that position. Del McGee has made him a priority, and I think there are other guys that are lower down on that list. In terms of the running backs, they're obviously still in conversation with some of these guys. Katron Allen, who's the number 10 running back in the country. out of IMG, Trevor Etienne, Travis's little brother, Tevin White. Those are some of the guys that are lower down on the list that Georgia has been in talks with. But, I think for Georgia, they really, really, really want to get Branson Robinson in the mix and, have a good opportunity to show him, what Athens is all about in the, early in the month of June.
Georgia strong in the states he would expect them to be. Evan Stewart comes out of Texas. Georgia makes a presence there. And run down the wide receivers for us.
Yeah, Georgia's got one commit at the wide receiver position already. Denylon Morissette out of Kennesaw, North Cobb, Atlanta area. He is 7-on-7 teammates with Georgia's 5-star quarterback commit in Gunnar Stockton. One of the top prospects in the country at quarterback, and also 7-on-7 teammates with Georgia defensive back commit Marcus Groves Killebrew, as well as a couple of big-time Georgia prospects. So Denylon, Gunnar, Marcus, those guys have been in the ear of some of these other big-time prospects for the Bulldogs at wide receiver and at tight end as well. Kojo Antwi would be one of the big-time prospects for them. He's a 7-on-7 teammate of theirs, as well as tight end Oscar Delp. Both of those guys are out of the Atlanta area. Obviously, that's a big recruiting ground for the Bulldogs. And both of them will be on campus along with Denylon for that first weekend in June. You mentioned Evan Stewart. He's certainly a top prospect for Georgia at the wide receiver position. Speedster out of Texas, Frisco, Texas, Dallas area. He is former Texas commit, ended up coming off of Texas's commit list when Steve Sarkisian took over as the head coach. And not anything against Steve Sarkisian. He just wanted to be able to, see some of these schools in June once the recruiting period opened up, wanted to, make those connections with other coaches. And so, Evan Stewart, he's got some family connections in Atlanta. Georgia's been pushing for him for a while. He will be on campus in June, believe the third weekend. He will be there June 18th, along with some other big time prospects for an official visit. But like I said, they're hitting that first weekend hard. We'll have Kojo Antwi and Oscar Delp on campus, two pass catchers that they would really like to bring in, as well as the second weekend they will have Andre Green Jr., who's a prospect out of Virginia, big time prospect for them. So they've got one wide receiver that they love in each of those weekends that they would love to pick up as a commit. They'll have them on campus for an official visit, as well as Morissette, a commit right now, that first weekend with his teammates.
Talking up the dogs with Palmer Toms from Dogs 247 Sports. Of course, jump on over there and check out his work and the rest of the staff. The 247 brand. That's all we need to say. And of course, this is the time to do it with recruiting about to go crazy. The floodgates about to open. Okay, the offensive line, as we discussed before we started record, Palmer, a bit different than what it's been in the past. Of course, Kirby Smart has recruited the offensive line as good as anyone in the country, but a bit of a different approach and just a numbers game at this point.
Yeah, you look at the last couple of classes that Sam Pittman brought in, and prior to him going to Arkansas as the head coach, and Matt Luke has just kind of picking up where he left off. It's been 5 stars on 5 stars on 5 stars, and they've been able to recruit those guys because there have been positions open. I think you look at where they're at now, like you said, it's a numbers game. They've got to get guys for offensive line because you can't get shut out on an offensive line class. But it's really hard to get 5 stars on 5 stars to sit behind 5 stars. And, so Georgia, right now looking at, some guys that might not be atop the offensive line class. But I think these are some guys that Georgia is certainly excited to get in there to work out. I think one of the things that, like we discussed, it's been 15 months since these coaches have seen these guys in person. This month they're going to be able to have these guys in there working with their assistant coaches, working out for the coaches. and really getting to know these kids and help them develop as prospects. And so, that first weekend, you'll see Georgia first week, you'll see them having a couple of, 3-star, 4-star guys on the offensive line. Drew Bobo, who's out of Columbia, South Carolina, son of former Georgia offensive coordinator, former Georgia quarterback Mike Bobo, who is now over at Auburn. He'll be in there. Tyler Gibson, Kason Henry, Elijah Pritchett, who's a big-time prospect for them out of Columbus, Georgia. He's a 4-star tackle, probably one of those top 5 offensive linemen that Georgia would take. He'll be in there on June 1st to work out. And then, I think if you're looking at just who Georgia, if they could have their pick of whoever they want in this class, realistically, in terms of, these offensive linemen, Tyler Booker out of IMG Academy, he's big on Georgia. He'll be in June 18th, along with several of his IMG teammates. Addison Nichols will be in there the first weekend. He's out of the Greater Atlanta Christian. And so he'll be in there the first weekend. And then Jacob Hood is another guy that Georgia really likes. He's out of the Nashville area. We mentioned with Jordan James that they've got one commit in that area. They're looking to get 2 and pick up Jacob Hood.
Palmer Tom's on the line to talk Georgia football, and of course June is going to be huge in the recruiting game, running down position by position. Go to the defensive line. The difference here, I think, in terms of numbers is, of course, typically a 5 starting offensive lineman. You want to mix in about 2 more. Typically that's kind of the mindset, but they just come in waves on the defensive side. In the trenches, and Georgia's been as good as anyone in bringing those guys in, and they're going to go after a slew of them again here in 22.
Yeah, and along the same lines of the numbers game, they've already got a couple of defensive line commits. Bear Alexander, 5-star defensive tackle out of Fort Worth. He's Georgia's highest rated prospect overall. And so they will have him in for a unofficial visit, first day of June. They'll have him in June 1st, next Tuesday. He is certainly a guy that I think is going to go see some of these other campuses. When you're in that, middle of Texas area, you're going to be highly pursued by some of these other schools. So I think Texas A&M is hot on his trail. I would guess that he's probably going to go see the Aggies and see the campus that they've got, what they've got to offer in College Station. And I think there's certainly going to be plenty of schools after him. So it's big for Georgia to get him in early. Not only on the commit board, one of 12 commits that they have, but to get him in visiting. Tyree West is another defensive lineman that they have committed. And so those 2 guys, they want to build on top of those, and they've got, plenty of prospects. Travis Shaw, 5-star out of North Carolina. He's a big time prospect for them. Michael Williams out of Columbus, Georgia, 5-star prospect. Looking at further down the board, you've got some guys that they would love to take. Christian Miller, also out of Georgia. Aaron Bryant is a 3-star guy that they will have in for an official visit. And then, some 5-star talent guys like Shamar Stewart and the number 1 player in the country, Walter Nolan. They're going to try and get those guys in for visits. Stewart will be there later in the month. Nolan has kind of, I don't know that he has set some of his visits, but he has said in the past that he would like to get to Athens. I think he unofficially visited earlier this spring just to kind of see the campus, and obviously wasn't able to interact with the coaches. So, Kirby would like to get him back on campus to be able to interact with him face to face and, show him what they've got. I mentioned Bryant. He's a 3-star defensive tackle out of South Haven, Mississippi. He will be in for an official visit that first weekend. So, Georgia's going to be hitting the defensive line hard. And Trey Scott's gonna make himself some money with the way that he's recruiting this defensive line class.
So you've got all those guys that are either on the interior or definitely on the defensive end role, but then you got a Nate White, as you talked about, who may stand up as an outside linebacker out of Philadelphia or may have his hand in the ground, but Georgia going up to Philadelphia to hopefully reel him in.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. Kirby Smart has recruited that Philadelphia area very well. You know, brought in DeAndre Swift out of there, as well as Mark Webb, a cousin of Swift's. You know, and then you look at this most recent, you know, this most recent class and the transfer that they've got out of West Virginia. He's also from that Philadelphia area. So I believe he was high school teammates with White, and so you know, I think Georgia feels good about where they're at with him, but, you know, obviously they're going to want to get him on campus, and they will have him on campus for an official visit June 11th, that second weekend in the month of June. So certainly, you know, I think when you look at recruiting is a game of looking at what you have currently and what you are going to need, expecting what you're going to need. And I think, you know, Georgia expects to need some guys to play that, you know, wide defensive end, stand up, edge rusher type player, because in the past, you know, that's been a room that has been loaded for defensive coordinator Dan Lanning. You know, in the past with Azeez Ojulari, Jermaine Johnson, well, they're both gone. And then, you know, looking at this year, they have Nolan Smith as well as Adam Anderson. Those two guys very well could be gone if they have the seasons that Georgia fans hope and expect them to have in 2021. So, you know, I think that is a room that they've got to address. They've got a couple of guys on board there already. And I think, you know, but you know, you can never have enough talent in those edge rushers. You know, I mentioned the guys that they have already. They've got edge rusher Darius Smith already on board. He's a 4-star guy out of Georgia. And then they've got a couple of other guys committed to play linebacker. You know, a lot of times you see these linebacker commits. They could play inside, they could play outside. It kind of just depends on the need that they have and when they get on campus. And so Jalen Walker, he's a 4-star commit, top 50 player in the country. He probably projects more as an inside linebacker than an outside guy, but, you know, very well has that skill set where he could play on the outside if needed, as well as CJ Washington, who's a longtime commit of theirs out of Cedartown, Georgia, 4-star guy, top 15 linebacker in the country.
Got Palmer Thomas on the line. Sorry about that. A little edit there. See, this is the other problem I have because of this call-in show. This thing is always connected. As soon as I hook up my audio board, regardless, I can't do anything. I could shut off the phone. But anyway, here we go. Palmer Thoms, of course, on the line, joining us to break down Georgia football, as he always does. We always appreciate Palmer giving of his time because he's going to be one busy guy when it comes June 1st, and specifically June 4th. That's the weekend that everybody jumps on campus for the first time. You mentioned, Palmer, about special talent, but also the fit being right, and that makes one of the reasons why Kamari Wilson is such a prized prospect for Kirby Smart.
Yeah, you know, like a lot of these other positions, they've got a couple of guys committed that could play in the secondary and probably will. Wilson being that number one safety in the country out of IMG Academy. You know, that's a school that we're hearing a lot about for Georgia, which makes sense because Georgia's bringing in the top prospects and IMG's producing those top prospects. Wilson will be on campus for an official visit this first weekend, June 4th, as well as and several of these other IMG teammates of his will be there June 18th. We mentioned Tyler Booker already. Wilson being a safety, but then you've got other guys in the secondary as well. Keon Sabb, who's the number one athlete in the country, 5-star prospect there, and Dalen Everett, 5-star cornerback out of IMG, as well as Jihad Campbell. He's an edge rusher. He will be there June 18th as well, also out of IMG. So that's, you know, 4 IMG kids that they've got coming June 18th, and then Wilson coming June 4th. You know, some big time prospects that they would like to get out of Bradenton, Florida. And, you know, I think the hope is that it can kind of start with Wilson. Georgia has taken the crystal ball projection lead for him. He's 5-star prospect, number 1 safety in the country, 24 player overall. Georgia currently holds all 4 of the crystal ball projections for Wilson, including a couple of 247 experts. I feel like that's a player that they feel confident about, but obviously they're getting him on campus that first weekend with several other players that they feel confident about. A lot of Georgia fans are expecting that first weekend to be a big one, and it certainly is going to be for Georgia. Opening up and showing these kids campus for the first time. Since they last got there, Georgia has moved into a new $80 million football facility that'll add on to the indoor practice facility that they've got. The coaches moved in there just after spring practice. Players moved into a new locker room in there, and so I think this is an exciting time for Georgia, and it really does start that first weekend with guys like Wilson coming into town.